Welcome to Office Hours. Today is January 13th, and we're here to talk about all things search marketing and SEO and stuff like that. We had a lot of great questions submitted, so we're just going to start running into them head first and see what we find, because I think some of these questions are actually questions we probably all kind of have rolling around the back of our head, a lot of cases. So, Tricia, you asked the first question.
Yes.
And you're asking about how to get a baseline report without Google Analytics.
Well, yeah. So there's a website, and I'm going to be basically redoing, and I want to know, the before and after. My problem is that first off, the before doesn't have Google Analytics, and I can't add it to it because it's not a WordPress site. It's a static site. And so like, is there a good place? I know it's not going to be perfect, which I'm not looking for, but like, is there something like where can I go to do some type of reports, and what should I look for?
Do you have access to their server or their cPanel or anything?
Maybe.
Well, with such a firm answer.
I believe so.
So first of all, I'd say maybe it's too late for this. It might not be worth it. But just because it's not WordPress doesn't mean you can't add analytics. Stephanie and I are working on the ugliest site ever together. She didn't build the ugliest site. Someone else built the ugly site, and
Okay.
she's helping redesign it. But the first thing I did is I literally went into every page and added Google Analytics just so I could see.
Yeah.
And so if you can, it's worth it to be able to show the client, look at the difference we made.
Okay.
But it is a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
I really appreciate a content management system like WordPress where you do it in one little quick.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is I don't know that I have the expertise to do it without messing it up.
Well, you could read HTML.
Yeah.
So what I would do first of all, I'm imagining it's only like a few pages, maybe a half dozen HTML pages.
Yeah, it might be a little bit more. And it's actually, it's a site, and I do think I have access to the cPanel, but it's like on GoDaddy. So it's like one of their whatever type of things.
Well, you can go into the file manager and literally open up. You can see every HTML, every page with an HTML end to the file name, and literally go in. And Google Analytics says this is where you add it on the page. So you could do that.
Okay.
Now, if you want it, if you're almost done with the rebuild, it might not be worth it because you might not even get enough data.
Okay, so that's what say one question is, so like, how much time do I need to give it, like once it's there, to say, okay, and then I can have the new one go live, like?
Well, that's what I was kind of saying. I would love to have a baseline data for you, but how much data do you need? And that really is a function of, well, how long until the site's launched? If it's launched in a couple of weeks from now, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
Right? I think you just have 2 weeks of data. And so then the best you could say is, well, we beat the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which isn't very impressive.
Okay.
If it's still 3 months out, then maybe. So that's what I said, cPanel, because sometimes in cPanel, there's like a server log analytics.
Okay.
And some of those are pretty crappy because server log analytics will reflect people and bots. So you can't really tell you can't distinguish them as clearly. What's nice about Google Analytics is it takes a human to execute the code, basically.
Yes. Okay.
Not always, but basically. So you know it's a person that's visiting. If you use the web server analytics, which some cPanels have installed automatically, you might be able to get some sort of baseline. But I've seen, for instance, I got a client in a former agency one time. It's hilarious. They're like, we get 1 million visitors a day. And we're like, no, you don't. And they're like, it says it in our analytics. And we're like, no, it doesn't. It turns out they were looking at their web server log and they had 1 million hits on all of their files, and they weren't even distinguishing CSS files and JavaScript
Mhm.
and bots and stuff like that. And so they were just lumped. So when we told them how many people they really had, then they were really disappointed, because they just didn't
They thought
understand
they
what
had a
they were looking
million. Yeah.
for. So, but if you needed some baseline, you would still have that.
Okay.
Well, you might have that as you put them on a better server.
Yeah.
And then you could compare.
Yeah, they won't stay at GoDaddy.
Yeah. So, I like the way you're thinking about this, but it might just be,
Okay.
too late.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And I know one thing is that right now they don't even have a call to action. So
Right.
I mean, like, so it's not even getting that. It would just be visitors. So okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
Cool.
that
Great question. I love the way you're thinking about it, but you're right. It might be.
Yeah. And amazingly, this site was built less than a year ago.
Yeah.
That I'm redoing. So
It's kind of malpractice for me if people don't install analytics when they launch a site.
yeah, I mean, especially now. I mean, yeah. So.
Yeah, because it's easy, free, cheap, and even if they don't look at it, they'll be glad to have it later.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, great question, Allison. You're up. No, you can't hear me. Oh, you're on mute. So I'm going to read your question. Okay, so Allie's says, is there a way to track website navigation from social media sources? In other words, if 10 people came to your website from Facebook, can we see what those 10 people did on the website? Okay, great question. And the short answer is Google Analytics isn't the right tool to do this. Google Analytics basically is set up to anonymize individuals interacting with your website because Google Analytics believes that it's a privacy violation to follow an individual through a website. So what they do is they lump people together and they say, people who landed on this page tended to go to this page next, but they don't tell you which ones did. So there are reports in Google Analytics under the behavior section that will say 4 people who landed on this page, such a percent of these people went to that page next, such a percentage left the website, such a percentage went to this other page next, and then this page next, and then this page next. So you can kind of see a general flow, but it's only as good as if you have a lot of people. So if you only have 1 or 2, 3 people landing on a page, it's probably not going to be enough data to see that follow through. There are analytics packages like KISS Metrics that is designed to do this. It's expensive, and because what they do not believe it's a privacy violation to follow individuals through the site. So being that it's expensive, we have to ask ourselves, is it worth that expense to know this information? So then the question becomes, what do you want to do with this? So I'm going to pause this question so we can get back to talk about what you hope to get out of it when you're available. And then we'll skip to a next question in order to get back to that later. Okay, so we're going to jump now to Steffi's question about home links in nav bars. Do you recall your question, Steffi?
Yeah, I saw this report from a guy an SEO person that sent to a client of mine, and I was reading through the report and he brought up some things I really didn't know about, so I thought I'd ask.
Yeah. So you're asking about, do you recommend placing a home link in the nav bar? Is it important to place text above the fold versus images? Do you need to further discuss sessions by host name? Okay, so that's another question. But so home link in the nav bar. first of all, I think it's important that you have a link to your homepage from every page,
Mhm.
whether or not it says home. I don't think it's magical or not.
Yeah, the logo, as long as the logo is linking, it should be fine.
At bare minimum. So I'm going to, for my reference, I would go to Google's manual search quality guidelines.
Mhm.
And they talk about the idea that people do understand naturally that a clickable logo will get you to the homepage, and it should do that, right? If it doesn't do that, Google says that might be a quality issue. But if it does do that, then sure. Now, Google does recommend, or in the guidelines says, hey, it's a great idea to have the word home as well.
Mhm.
But it does not say you're in low quality website if you don't.
Okay.
So I would think that's a majoring on the minor as long as you can get there.
Can
Yeah.
I add something to that?
Sure.
So this isn't from any studies or anything I found online, but I literally remember where I was and what I was doing when I found out that if you click the logo, it will take you back home. Before, I had no clue. So I consider myself now, more techie than a lot of people. So I automatically know that. But I think that, and a lot of users do, and probably younger users, but it depends also on your demographics. I think that some older users may not have a clue that if you click the logo, it takes you home. So just a thought.
Yeah. It's just a matter of saving space sometimes, though, in the nav bar. A lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah, that's key. And I can say with pretty good confidence, it's not an SEO issue if the word home doesn't appear in the nav bar,
Okay.
right? It could be a usability issue where people might not know to get to your home,
Yeah.
right? And I think I agree with Tricia that it could be an age or a demographic issue of just not being familiar with how websites typically work.
Yeah.
But even in the manual review guidelines, they say, visit the homepage. Sometimes that means you got to click on it. So they, even with technical savvy people who are reviewing these, they kind of have to mention
Yeah.
that you should click on. So I think someone's majoring on the minors to say, oh my gosh, red alert, you don't have the word home in your nav bar. Yeah, I don't think it works
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
way.
I
Well,
think
it's also, apparently this is a Wix site, and she had all her like products listed in a pull down. And he said that Wix pull downs are not searchable by the search engines, which I did not know. But
Probably.
that's why we moved them into the main nav bar and took off the home, which she only had like 6 spots, and that's it. So we
Right.
had to deal with what we had. So that's another thing I thought was really interesting. I had no idea the pull downs were not searchable on Wix.
wow.
Well, pull downs in general are not crawlable because
Oh,
the
really?
Google search bot cannot click on something and then select from that.
Mm,
So, because that requires a human interaction. So
okay.
drop downs are not choosable. Now, in some cases, it's totally fine because you don't care if Google clicks on it, right?
Mhm.
But if it's navigation, you'd really want Google. Now, that's very different from a menu drop down because of how it's coded. You and I know about how menus are coded.
Um,
Some people don't know the distinction.
yeah. Say this again, because I think you just confused me.
Okay, so the way menus are built, they are, as long as they're running on mostly CSS, they are clickable by Google.
Because they're built like bullet lists, right?
Right, it's a bullet list and it's the styling that affects whether you see it or not JavaScript. And so Google can use a menu system.
Okay.
But what it can't use is in HTML, we call a checkbox, or not a checkbox, well, they can't use checkboxes either, but drop-down lists in an HTML element.
So like
That is coded totally different.
like there's like a heading and a plus sign, and I go and I click on it and I read more. Is that what you're talking about?
That's a little different too. So that is the kind of if you want to hide a group of text, you might have a line item and you click and it expands, what we call an accordion.
Uh-huh.
That there's a lot of debate in the SEO community on whether Google can and can't read that.
I don't like them because I want the user to have to work less.
Agreed.
That's why I don't use them. But
And
so I guess I'm confused about the first one you're talking about.
So some, like, let's say you have a contact form,
Uh-huh.
And in that contact form, you're selecting, there's a drop-down selector box where you say, I want to talk to sales, I want to talk to technical support, I want to talk to accounting. And that is an HTML element
Mhm.
called a drop-down that Google can't click.
Ah,
That,
okay.
we don't care if Google clicks. We don't want Google, nor does Google want to be submitting our contact forms. But if it's a menu system, yes, we click it to expand it, but the way it's coded is with CSS, and CSS detects a state, and then that Google could totally read. So menus are built in it. Even you can make a menu look like that, but it's really the devil's in the details of the coding. So you got to be really careful when you do hiding and adding and citing and selecting stuff, because you got to code it right. Otherwise, Google might have a problem. So like old.
Well, I guess Wix doesn't code their menu very well because he was saying the pull down in the menu was not
Oh, well, it could be because they could use a JavaScript dependent.
right. So I guess it depends on the coding.
Right, exactly. Google is better at reading JavaScript than it used to be, but I, as a rule, try not to make it hard for Google. So I've told clients to rebuild their menu because they build them all in JavaScript.
Okay.
Right, and you know, maybe Google can crawl it, but why are we making it hard? We want to make Google's job easy. I have not evaluated a Wix drop-down menu. I wouldn't be surprised if it was JavaScript because Wix is a pretty poor system.
Mhm.
But we could look at that and see pretty easy. And the easy way to do it is to view a web page, go into your systems, turn off JavaScript on your web browser, and try to interact with it.
Right.
If by turning off JavaScript in your browser settings, you can't interact with it, then Google can't either.
Okay,
Because the
right.
Google bot does not use JavaScript. So it's always hard to make an overarching statement, but that could be. The second thing you mentioned, Steffi, is it's important to place text above fold versus images.
Yeah, this person's website had, a large image with image text next to it and then her text down below. And he was saying place it up, like actual text above. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
Not that that's a common thing I do at all when I design. I always
Right.
have text, but
Yeah, and you know how to do it right, which means we're not going to embed text within the image. We're going to put it on top of the image, and it's really text, not just a picture. And that's important. If design was not a factor, if I got my way as the SEO because SEO is the only thing we got to worry about, I'd have all the text on the top of the page and all the images at the bottom. However, that would be an ugly site.
Yeah.
And an ugly site wouldn't convert for crap because it would have no credibility. And so that's why, okay, yeah, I wish all the text could be at the top, but it's just not a good idea. So like I have a client and they kind of refuse to put text at the top. So all I'm allowed to do in a lot of cases is put at the very bottom. Better than nothing, better than no text at all. And we're seeing it in the data. Google's sending people. I wish I could put more on the top, but I know that there's more to consider than just what I want. And so I have to be a team player and I have to say, okay, and so what I'll sometimes do is say, can I put a paragraph at the top and then the rest of the text at the bottom? So I get as much text as I can, as close to the top as possible. Okay, great. And that's a compromise I think a lot of designers are willing to do. But, and so I'd say, yes, text at the top will always do better. But there's more to consider than that. Like, let's not be so laser focused on ranking factors that we forget that and make our site look horrible and not convert and not be engaging and interesting, you know. The opposite extreme is where
I
you're
just have
only
never
using
heard it being an SEO factor.
I'd say it is an SEO factor, but I'd say that it's a low SEO factor, and there's probably more important things to consider about the website as a whole.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Also-
remember, of all the SEO factors, the hundreds of them, some are much more important than others.
Yeah.
And I'd say text higher up is a ranking factor, but it's probably not more important than getting someone to say, oh, I trust this website. This is what I want to be. Like, that's worth a lot more to me than the little bit of ranking bonus I get from putting text on the top and making it a
Okay.
bad user experience. Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like, do you want the ranking or do you want the conversions?
exactly. And that's why I try to steer people away from rank.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
who cares where we rank if we're getting to customers? And well, who cares? What, yeah, I'm exaggerating, of course.
No, I know.
So you had another question about further discussed sessions by host name,
Mhm.
Steffi.
I didn't really understand in your tutorial. I'm not quite grasping it. And the link in my report, goes to this page that I have no understanding of why. It goes to your acquisition all traffic source medium.
Okay, so we got to there. The link, I think you have to update the link in there to make it go to the right report.
Oh,
And I'll double check in the documentation to see if I've explained that. That documentation is getting too long. So I need to break that out a little
yeah,
bit.
I know I had to add the link to self-referring traffic because the one I imported did not have it, and I added it based on your tutorial,
Yeah.
but I didn't see anything change for the sessions by host name.
Okay. So yeah, no, okay. So it shouldn't, if I'm remembering it right, it shouldn't be setting up to link to something necessarily, but it should be displaying host name variable. So let's explain what a host name means.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone visits a web page, what's going on in Google Analytics is the Google Analytics code is sending information to Google Analytics in their database.
Mm-hmm.
One of the pieces of information that code sends to Google Analytics is on what website was this code found? Typically, that should be your website. Sometimes it could be something like YouTube, because YouTube allows you to add your Google Analytics code to your YouTube page. And so we'd want to know how much of our traffic is really on the YouTube page versus our website.
Oh.
Sometimes we'd want to know, MailChimp does this too. How many people are visiting our MailChimp landing page? It would say in there. All kinds of things. Shopify does it and a couple things. Also, there is an active form of web analytics spam where they will insert code into randomly generated numbers that might just happen to be your Google Analytics code, and that will show a not set host name, meaning there's traffic coming to Google Analytics, but Google Analytics was not told on which page that was executed, because there's not a page executed, because it's a computer program sending the data in. And so we want to have that data in our dashboard to make sure that the data we're looking at is as clean as possible, and it's mostly like 99% from our own site. So on your dashboard, your host, when you look at your dashboard, what are the different host names listed on your dashboard?
Just my Evolve website.
Good. So that means everything's going right,
Mm-hmm.
and your Google Analytics code is not on any other domain,
Mhm.
and nobody is trying to spoof your Google Analytics code by inflating your numbers. So that's great. You might see something called web light now and then in that host name report. And what web light means is it's actually for website users on smartphones. And it's Google's way of making a website super light on very slow cell phone connections. So web light is a legitimate visitor. It's just usually a visitor from a very slow cell phone, maybe in a non-Western country. So I wouldn't worry if you see web light appear in your host name. But if you see anything else appear in your host name for that dashboard, then I would be, and look and see what that is. Do you need to do some web spam prevention? Do you need to exclude some host names from your report? Do you need to make sure someone's not adding your code to another site? But that's what that's for. I don't think it's clicking. I don't think I set that report up to click to get to a report that was valuable. The report, the listed host names is all you really need.
Okay. Yeah.
Does
And I
that
haven't-
help?
Yeah, it does. I wrote that down really well. And then last, I don't know if I could, you have other questions to cover. I have more on that troubleshooting dashboard.
Yeah, I'm going to get back to that one. I want to go to Allie's question here back
Yeah.
real quick. Hi, Allie.
Hi. Sorry about before. A call that typically takes 10 minutes took 45 minutes.
Yes.
I don't know why. So, yeah, so sorry about that.
So I answered your question. Any other questions?
Um,
I'm kidding.
I heard part of what you said, and I know you said you can't do it in analytics.
So yeah, so by default, Google Analytics doesn't like to show how individuals interact with the website because they feel it's a privacy violation. Of course, they're happy to violate privacy in other ways, but just not that way. Which is a way of saying Google Analytics didn't build it to do it, and they're not about to change it, so tough.
Mhm.
There are ways to see how traffic as a whole tends to go to the next page under the behavior reports.
And is there a way to see the specific landing pages of those social referrals?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Because even
So,
that would be helpful.
Well, but let me ask the bigger picture question. What are you trying to accomplish with this?
What we're trying to accomplish is to see if the traffic that we're getting from our social media is productive traffic, or if it's just like people clicking on it, like maybe even by accident, or not really doing anything, not really interacting at all, like, or if they're doing something, meaningful with following, adjusting our social media as needed based on that.
Okay. And because not everyone who comes from social media converts, which is definitely
Yeah.
valuable, right?
And we want to see too, like, where they're landing is going to also show what kind of content is being interacted with the most.
Yeah.
As opposed to, because like social media has their own ways of tracking like interaction, and personally I think those numbers are really inflated, like a lot, when you think, like, based on the amount that, like, say Facebook or Instagram or Twitter like says the interaction we got from it, and then seeing the analytics side of like what actually amounts into traffic to the website, like I find it hard to believe that that many people actually interacted. So those that do, I want to know, like, what is the content that they're actually clicking on and coming through to the website.
Yeah. Forewarning, I might have a little cat fight on my hand here.
Oh, I mean, if you couldn't tell, my cat was sleeping on me for like the first
So if you hear a terrible sound,
yeah,
everybody's okay.
Pickles is snoring in my lap right now. So
That one cat's just getting his butt whooped. So do you mind if we look at your analytics?
Sure.
All right. Do you have it queued up?
Pull it up real quick.
Let me give you permission. Up. All right. Okay. So the first place I would go is acquisition, because we're asking about social traffic. Then I would go to all traffic, and I would go to channels.
This is already more than I usually do because I usually just stay on the dashboard. So,
Okay, well, the dashboard is very search focused, and we're talking social media here. So if we scroll down on the right side, we can get to where it says social. And this, you remember up in the upper right-hand corner, we can set the time
right.
that we're looking at. So this is just the last week. We could go 28 days if we wanted a little bit more data, but let's just work with, yeah, go ahead and set it to the last 28 days. That's good enough, whatever. We're not trying to be too scientific here. So now we scroll down and we can see interaction with social is your third amount of users and sessions, 1.26 pages per session. Now, I feel that this pages per session is a little bit of a metric that can be a real false positive. So, because what pages per session could mean is they found something on your site and they clicked, a quarter of them, 0.26, decided to go to another page. It could also mean, which would be good, right? Yay, a quarter of our social traffic goes to another page. It could also mean that your social traffic's going to the wrong page and people are frustrated and they're clicking around your site. And so we can't tell that. But we can tell that people tend to do it. Bounce rate is another way to look at it. So that's 80% bounce rate. So that means 80% of the people who clicked from social media post click back to where they came from.
Right.
Is that bad? Well, it could be. It could be that people go to your site and go, oh, this is crap, and go back. It could also mean people go to your site, read the blog post, say, wow, this is wonderful, and call you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's still considered a bounce. It could be they go there, they read that, they're like, this is great. They write down your thing, your domain on a piece of paper, and next week they call you. That's a very successful visit, but it's not reflected in bounce rate.
Right.
Social media is always going to have a very high bounce rate. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but it's better than your other, which is 90%. And we'll have to look at what other means. But so if you click on the word social there, by default, it's going to take us to the different social networks.
Okay.
All right. So your Facebook is outperforming all the rest,
Mm-hmm.
right? And your Facebook bounce rate is actually considering better than LinkedIn, and more pages per session. Now, what you're also seeing here is average session duration,
Mm-hmm.
which again is actually Google Analytics can't do that well, doesn't report that well, because Google Analytics doesn't know when you leave. It only knows when you've clicked on the next page.
Yeah.
So that's a little misleading. Theoretically, that could be 30 minutes and 22 seconds and we wouldn't know, because 30 minutes is a session. And so that's just a little confusing.
Yeah, because if
But-
10 people spend 10 minutes reading the article and then leave, it's not going to register as 10 minutes.
Right,
Only if
exactly.
they
A
then
bounce.
navigate
Yeah.
to another page within the same website.
Exactly. That's why that's almost one of the worst metrics here.
Yeah.
Doesn't even help us. Except to say, hey, it looks like a lot of people spend more time on Facebook from Facebook, but we don't know. We do know there's no conversions, at least goal number 1 conversions. We could look at like softer leads, like setting up goals for signing up for email lists, in which case that could be another successful way of measuring the quality of our traffic if we were to push hard to get people to sign up on an email list and track that as a goal. That is probably an easier goal for something like social media traffic, because social media is a great way to introduce people to you, who aren't necessarily ready to hire you for the services. They might, however, be so interested after visiting your page, they would sign up for an email list, and then you can groom them. So that might be worthwhile to track that. But here's one way we can do it. Now, on the left side, underneath acquisition, if you go to the bottom, towards the bottom, you see social. Click on that, overview. Go to overview first. Thank you. So this is Google Analytics' attempt to salvage social media traffic. So already we're seeing some different numbers. 17 conversions. Oh, sorry. That's 17 conversions overall, regardless of source. But what they'll do is here they'll say contributed social, meaning how many people were converting from the site, and social media was one way they came to visit your site between the first time they visited and the last time they visited. So let's say they first get introduced to you through Google and they click, and then they follow you on social media. And then the second time they visit your site, they come from Facebook and they click to get to your article. And then they sign up for an email. And then the third time they read the email and they sign up, and that's a goal. Well, that would show as one contributed social conversion, because at one point, while they were visiting your site from several different sources, in that case, 3 sources, organic search, social media, and email, they contributed. The social was part of that process. Also, last interaction social means by default, Google Analytics says, we're going to, I'm confusing things. Oh, last interaction social means the thing they did right before they converted was come from social media. That's typical how Google Analytics reports goals. So that is kind of a comparison of understanding that social media, people don't always become customers right after a social media visit, but they're trying to help us see how this works. So we can play around in these reports under social media, and we can look at network referrals, landing pages, conversions. Go ahead and click on landing pages there. So again, these are the landing pages. We don't know which social networks. We just know these are pages that people come to from social networks. We can play with this report. I think if you go to the top, so we can add segments and stuff like that to only see a particular social network and stuff like that. Obviously, the acquisition report already kind of does this for us, but that's what we can play with here. Did you set up you'd probably have to set up a segment for social, like Facebook or something like that. This is only US, okay. Not much different. Yeah. So we can go to the conversions on the left side. And go up and see towards the top of the tab, it says assisted versus last interaction analysis. Okay. So what this is going to do is break down all conversions based on different ways of measuring the conversion. Assisted conversion being somewhere between their first visit and the last visit, they came to your site from social. That's an assisted conversion. Or last click is someone who just right before they converted, they came from social. So this helps you be able to see conversions better. And
so am I interpreting this right, that basically nobody who visits our site either through organic search or direct then comes to our site via social media click? Because this is all 0.
So they can come by social media or they can come by organic. It's how the source of the traffic is one or the other. So what this report's telling you is within the last, the days you set,
Mhm,
which is all of December,
mhm.
nobody converted from any social media, whether
Something else.
into what you set as a goal in Google Analytics,
Oh. Oh.
right?
Oh, okay. I see.
Right. This
So
is a
nobody
goal that you
came from
set.
social did our contact us goal, basically.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
They could have called you,
Okay.
right? They could have done a lot of things, but
Mhm,
that, and honestly, this is pretty typical of social. Social
Okay.
does not convert typically well.
mhm.
Another way you can look at this, if you go to behavior on the left side, go to behavior flow. So this is the closest you can get to following people through your site.
Right.
And so in this case, it's by landing page. People who typically visit your homepage, they start with your homepage, and then the top page to go is that under first interaction, one over to the right at the very top. That's the typical first page they go after visiting your homepage,
That's good.
regardless of how they
That's
found you.
our main service. So that's a
Yeah.
good place for people
Yeah.
to navigate to.
Yeah. And frankly, it's really good because the second one they go to is contact.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's great. And so you're seeing now you can drop the landing page and you can over on the left, I'm pointing at it, you can't see my screen, the drop down for landing page, and you can select something different. For instance, you could do, I would do source medium. So this says most of your of the traffic comes from Google Organic. Click on Google Organic. Highlight traffic through here. So you can see how it flows through your site.
What is this middle this?
That's where they start. So they come from organic and they typically go to your homepage.
Okay.
If they don't go to your homepage, they're going to go to assessing something, something. If they don't go to that, they're going to go to this.
This is our blog post that gets so much attention all the time.
Okay, click on that. Highlight traffic through there. Okay, so now
Okay.
look at that. One out of 40 people went to your contact page after visiting that.
That is really interesting that 40 out of 93 people that read this blog then went to contact us. That's what
From, or in this case, we're not showing the source. Some of them came from organic, direct, stuff like that. So we can go to, if you, rather than source medium, just go to source at the top. Check my time. Okay. So you can go to the third source, click on Facebook down there. Now, Facebook's weird in that in Google Analytics, it doesn't distinguish. There's several URLs that could be a Facebook URL, but highlight traffic through there. So you could see most people actually not 8 out of, okay, this is some 8 went to play-based stuff.
This is the
Right.
blog post.
Yeah. So this is watching people go. This is the best Google Analytics can do for this.
Interesting.
So there's another place we can play around with.
This is fancy.
Isn't it cool? Now we got to be really careful because this could be a real distraction. It's a lot of fun.
This is a rabbit hole for sure. I feel
Exactly.
like I really
So we gotta keep focused on making sure what's worked rather than go down the rabbit hole and be like, this is really cool. I'm wasting an afternoon playing with something and not get anywhere, which is Google and others tend to do. Go to site content on the left side for me. I think we want to go to content drill down. I think that's where I want.
It's a very aggressive sounding page.
It is sound. Okay. No, go to all pages. There we go. Okay, at the top it says Explore and Navigation Summary.
Mhm.
Click on Navigation Summary. Okay, here's what's cool. So you see in the middle, it says current selection.
Yeah.
Your homepage, right?
Okay.
So it says, according to this, 78% of the entrances were on your homepage. And then exits, 40% of people exited your site after visiting the homepage. But 54.91% went to another page. Now, under current selection, rather than homepage, select something, and you can pick any page. So 81.25% came to this page from another page. And you can see on the left-hand column, what are those pages? Most of them your home page, your contact page, ABA therapy, blah, blah, blah. Of these people, most people left at that point.
Mhm. Oops, that's not what I wanted to click.
Contact's a really, really good one to look at. What are people doing? Most people go to another page after contact rather
Well,
than exit.
I would make the assumption that that is them filling out the form and then being navigated to the thank you page.
Well, you can see thank you is the third most popular page on the right column.
Wow.
So really, a lot of people go from contact to behavioral services. Now, so that is interesting. What that could mean is that is there a phone number on this page? I bet you there is.
Yeah,
either they're
put a phone
calling
number
you-
on every page.
Yeah, so they're calling and exiting, which happens to 15% of people exit from the contact page.
Hmm.
But the fact that most people go to behavioral health services is really interesting to me. We can't tell why. But 15% people who go to your contact page fill it out. Because that's where the thank you page is,
Interesting.
right? So this is the closest we can get to that in analytics.
Awesome. I
Okay.
just hope I retain this information. Analytics is very difficult for me to navigate because I feel like it's so much.
It is.
And like recreating what we go through on the calls, it can be a little bit challenging. And sometimes I have to go back and like reference what we talked about
Yeah.
because I'll like remember the results, but not always the steps to get
Yeah.
to that result. So this is interesting because I definitely have not been utilizing this the way that I could be utilizing it. I've been really utilizing the dashboard.
So good. Yeah, well, the dashboard should be helpful, but that's focusing on organic search, not social,
Mhm.
right? So two things, and then I think we got to tie up, and unfortunately we have to save Steffi's next questions for next week. But one thing is Google Analytics is changing to what they're calling GA4, and they haven't told us when,
Mm,
but GA4 will do this stuff better.
fancy.
I don't recommend changing to it yet. In fact, Google doesn't even recommend you change to it yet. Don't screw with your analytics codes. But they're going to move this, and it's going to be much better about this stuff. So we got to look forward to that. 2, my Google Analytics IQ certification expires in April. That means it's time for my annual Let's Do Google Analytics IQ certification together course, because I need a study group so I can be recertified. So I'll be offering that to everybody who wants to participate. I highly recommend it because then this will all become second nature to you. What we'll do and what we did last year was kind of divided it up, and we'd go through some of the lessons that Google provides, meet, talk about it, ask each other questions on where we're foggy, and then do the next series and do it in enough time to complete our test, and we can all become IQ certified from Google Analytics. It does take a lot of time, and it is honestly, it's not an easy test. I think it's really worth it. So I'll tell you about that when we're doing it, so you can all participate if you want. And last time it was, I think we did 4 of us did it, and we had a great time. But I just do it every year because I want to stay sharp with analytics, because a lot of our questions in this is analytics oriented, and the better we have a grasp on that, the better we can make
How
better
time
marketing
consuming is
decisions.
that?
Yeah. So I'll tell you when it's coming.
How much time do you dedicate like per week to that?
I'd say it takes probably 2 or 3 hours a week
Okay.
for maybe 4 weeks.
Mhm.
Most of that is doing Google's video lessons.
Mhm.
And then some of that time will be us meeting together to say, okay, I didn't quite get this. And then we can put our heads together and understand it a little better.
Yeah, I
So-
def-
A lot of like practical stuff because I know that personally I learn better when it's interactive and I'm actually doing something because like watching a video, I tune out really fast.
I'm really impressed with how Google, their education system set up.
Mhm.
There are little things where they'll say, go click on this. Oh, you clicked on the wrong thing. And so they do a good job mixing up learning styles.
Okay,
It's not just listening to a video.
that's good.
They actually give you transcripts of the videos. If you read better than you watch, you can read the video transcript.
That is interesting.
There's a lot of stuff. I feel that Google does a really good job with their educational system. And if there's any one certification that's worthwhile, this is it,
Yeah.
because it covers so much. There's a lot of sales pitch in it too. Unfortunately, Google wants you to know all about remarketing and how you can save the world through marketing by invading people's privacy. And, well, we'll just ignore that stuff, except so far as we have to know it to pass the test. But I highly recommend it. So,
Mhm.
thank you, everybody.
thank you.
Wonderful questions. Steffi, we'll get to your last question. We'll start with those next week, okay?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
a couple more. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
All right,
thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.